My name is Olivia Bennett. At my father's 70th birthday party, my stepbrother Mason pointed at the family photo and said, "Not you." Then he smiled. "Blood family only." Nobody stopped him. Not Victoria, not my cousins, not even my father. So I stepped out of the frame. 14 minutes later, every phone at the party buzzed. A notification appeared on every screen. Jonathan Bennett's digital legacy file has been released. And suddenly, Mason stopped smiling. My invitation arrived 11 days before the party. Everyone else's arrived months earlier. I only learned that because my cousin Charlotte accidentally mentioned the event. When I asked why nobody told me sooner, she went silent. That was my first warning. My stepmother Victoria never excluded people directly. She preferred subtle methods, missing emails, late invitations, forgotten calls. Everything looked accidental. Nothing ever was. And after 20 years, she had become very good at it. 3 days later, Dad called. "You're coming, right?" His voice sounded tense, almost worried. When I asked about the late invitation, he paused, then said, "There must have been a mistake." I didn't believe him, but I agreed to come. The party was held at an expensive downtown hotel, far bigger than anything Dad would have chosen himself. There were business executives everywhere, investors, partners, community leaders. It felt less like a birthday, and more like an announcement. I checked the seating chart. My seat was near the back, almost beside the service doors. Meanwhile, Victoria and Mason sat near the stage. Even distant relatives had better tables. Then I heard someone laugh behind me. Mason. When Dad saw me, he walked over quickly, then hugged me, tightly, longer than usual. When he finally stepped back, he said, "I'm glad you're here." Something about the way he said it felt important, like he needed me there. A photo display covered one side of the ballroom, pictures from Dad's life, his career, his marriage, his family. I started counting. Out of nearly 80 photographs, I appeared in only 3. That wasn't an accident. Later, I overheard Mason speaking with investors. He sounded unusually confident. One investor asked, "Ready for tonight?" Mason grinned. "More than ready." Then he added, "Everything becomes official after dinner." My stomach tightened. Official? What exactly was happening tonight? As dinner approached, Victoria crossed the room. She looked at me, then at my table, then smiled. Not kindly, not warmly. It was the smile of someone who believed she'd already won. I didn't know why. Yet. The photographer gathered everyone. Immediate family first. I stepped forward beside Dad. Then Mason raised his hand. "Hold on." The room became quiet. He looked directly at me, then said, "Family only." I frowned. "What does that mean?" His smile widened. "Blood family only." Nobody moved. Nobody objected. Dad looked down. Victoria folded her arms. So I stepped away. And 14 minutes later, every phone in that ballroom buzzed at exactly the same time. At exactly 7 o'clock, every phone in the ballroom buzzed. One after another. Then another. Within seconds, dozens of guests were staring at their screens. The room filled with confusion. People stopped talking, stopped eating, stopped smiling, including Mason. I pulled out my phone. A notification sat at the top. Jonathan Bennett's digital legacy file has been released. I had never heard of it. Apparently, neither had most guests. But when I looked toward Victoria, her face had gone pale. Very pale. I immediately looked at my father, expecting answers. Instead, he looked shocked. Actually shocked. Then I noticed something strange. Dad wasn't reaching for his phone. He was staring at Victoria, and Victoria looked terrified. Guests started opening the link. Mason moved fast, too fast. "Don't open that." His voice cracked. Nobody listened. Several investors had already clicked, a few relatives too. Then Victoria whispered, "Turn it off." That made everyone even more curious. The link opened to a video. My father appeared on screen. Different clothes, different background. Recorded months earlier. Then he looked directly into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, I finally found the courage to tell the truth." The entire ballroom went silent. The next sentence hit me immediately. Olivia Grace Bennett. My full legal name. Not Olivia, not sweetheart, not daughter. My full legal name. Then Dad said, "This begins with you." Every head in the room turned toward me. Dad explained the recording had been made 6 months earlier. A date stamp appeared. So did a lawyer's verification watermark. This wasn't some birthday surprise. This was planned. Carefully. Legally. And judging by Victoria's expression, she already knew it existed. Then Dad took a deep breath. For years, people have been told Olivia was no longer part of certain family plans. My pulse quickened, because I knew exactly what he meant. Family trusts, business succession, inheritance conversations, topics that always happened without me. Then Dad said, "That was never true." The room froze. Then I saw my own name, at the very top, and beneath it, legacy successor. I stopped breathing. Around me, guests were scrolling, whispering, reading faster now. Because for years, everyone assumed the future had already been decided. Apparently, it hadn't. I looked up from my phone, straight at Mason. His confidence was gone. His smile was gone. Even the color had disappeared from his face, because for years he'd acted like the future belonged to him. Now dozens of guests were reading something very different, and whatever came next, Mason clearly hadn't planned for it. The ballroom had become strangely quiet, not because people stopped reading, because they were reading carefully. One investor removed his glasses, read the document again, then looked directly at Mason. For the first time all night, Mason looked uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. For years, Victoria told everyone the same thing, that I'd chosen distance, that I'd moved on, that I wasn't interested in family matters. People believed her. Why wouldn't they? I wasn't there to defend myself. Now Dad's video was saying something very different, and guests were starting to notice. The next attachment opened automatically, a folder labeled Communication Records. My stomach tightened. Inside were emails. Old emails. Years of them. Messages Dad claimed he sent me. Messages I'd never received. Not one. Then I found one dated 12 years earlier. Subject: Proud of you. It was sent the week I graduated college. Dad wrote that he couldn't wait to attend, that he'd already booked a flight. I never saw that email. And he never showed up. All these years, I thought he simply didn't care. I was wrong. According to Dad's video, dozens of messages had been redirected, moved automatically, hidden, archived, never delivered. Then another screen appeared. The account settings, the forwarding rules, the administrator name attached to them, Victoria Bennett. The room reacted immediately. My cousin Charlotte stood up, slowly. Then she said, "Olivia invited him to graduation." Everyone looked at her. Charlotte swallowed hard. "I remember helping mail the invitation." The room became even quieter, because suddenly there was a witness. Another email appeared. My 25th birthday. Dad asking where I was. Dad saying he waited all evening. My eyes filled with tears. Because that year, I'd sat alone believing he'd forgotten. Meanwhile, he sat somewhere else believing I never came. And somebody had allowed that misunderstanding to live for years. Across the room, several papers slipped from Mason's chair. One investor picked them up. Speech cards, prepared remarks, future plans. Then someone read a line out loud. As the future leader of Bennett Industries, Mason lunged for the papers. Too late. Everyone had already heard it. Another attachment opened. Succession planning documents, corporate governance records, board recommendations. Guests started scrolling, then whispering, then staring. Because Mason's name wasn't listed as future CEO, not once. His role was marked. Pending conditions. That changed everything. Dad appeared again in the video. Older, tired, emotional. Then he said, "If Mason ever tells Olivia she isn't family, the next section should explain why he's wrong." I looked toward Mason. Victoria looked terrified, and whatever came next, they both already knew. Because neither of them was looking at the screen anymore. They were looking at each other. Dad's video continued. Then a new folder appeared. Founder Legacy Records. Victoria's face changed instantly. Mason stopped talking. Because apparently this wasn't about blood. It was about contribution. And contribution leaves a paper trail. Dad looked directly into the camera, then said, "For years, people assumed succession would follow family hierarchy." He paused, then shook his head. "That was never my plan." The ballroom became silent. Leadership should be earned. Not inherited. Not assumed. Earned. A document opened. 20-year contribution summary. Everyone started reading. Volunteer projects, charitable initiatives, community partnerships, employee mentorship programs, scholarship funding, every major contribution connected to the Bennett Foundation. Then guests noticed something. One name appeared constantly: Olivia Bennett. Project after project appeared. Programs I helped build. Fundraisers I organized. Partnerships I secured. Most had been publicly credited to executive teams, but the original records told a different story. My work had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. Then another file opened. This one carried Mason's name. The room became uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Because the comparison wasn't close. While I'd spent years building programs, Mason had spent years attending announcements. The difference was obvious, and everybody could see it. Another attachment appeared. Handwritten letters. The earliest came from my late mother, Evelyn Bennett. Founder, investor, first believer. Dad's voice returned. Evelyn wanted the company protected from entitlement. The room froze, because nobody expected her name to enter the story. One sentence appeared on screen, written in my mother's handwriting. "The future belongs to the person who serves the mission, not the person who expects the title." Nobody spoke, not even Victoria, because suddenly everyone understood. This legacy was never about blood. It was about stewardship. The final report opened. Succession evaluation criteria: leadership, integrity, accountability, respect for family, respect for employees, public conduct. Then came the final category: recognition of all immediate family members. My stomach tightened, because I already knew where this was going. Dad appeared one last time. If a successor attempts to exclude, diminish, or publicly deny a member of the Bennett family, he paused. They automatically fail the character review. The ballroom went completely silent. Everyone remembered the family photo. Everyone remembered Mason's words, and everyone knew exactly what had happened. The final page appeared. Signed. Witnessed. Verified. The succession committee recommendation. Then one line appeared at the bottom. Olivia Bennett has satisfied all founder legacy requirements. Below it, Mason Bennett, review failed. And suddenly, the man who said blood family only realized the future had never been decided by blood at all. It had been decided by character. Nobody spoke as guests read the succession clause. I read it twice, then a third time, because I wasn't sure I understood it correctly. Dad had added a specific provision 6 months earlier. A very specific provision. If any successor publicly excludes, diminishes, or denies the standing of an immediate Bennett family member, their succession rights may be suspended pending review. The ballroom went silent, because everyone had witnessed exactly that. An investor stood up, then quietly asked, "Did this happen tonight?" Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. The photographer was still standing beside the backdrop. The family photo setup was still there. Half the guests had witnessed it, and dozens more had heard about it within minutes. There was no debate, only facts. Mason immediately started talking. Too fast, too loud. "That's not what I meant." Nobody responded. "I was joking." Still nothing. Then he looked toward Dad. "Tell them." But Dad remained seated, silent. For the first time in years, nobody was protecting Mason from the consequences of his own words. The investors were no longer looking at Mason like a future CEO. They were looking at him like a liability. One by one, phones disappeared into pockets. Conversations stopped. Smiles vanished. The confidence Mason had walked into the room with was gone. And he knew it. Victoria finally stood. "This is ridiculous." Her voice shook. "Olivia is turning everyone against us." I almost laughed, because I still hadn't said anything. Not one accusation, not one speech, not one insult. Everything came directly from Dad's own files, and everyone knew it. Then something happened that shocked me more than the digital legacy file. Dad stood up, slowly. The room became silent again. He looked directly at me, then at everyone else, and said, "For 20 years, I let people make Olivia feel like she didn't belong." My eyes filled instantly, because I'd waited most of my life to hear those words. Dad continued. "I told myself I was keeping peace." He shook his head. "I was keeping silence." Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Then he pointed toward the screen. "Everything in that file is true." That sentence ended every argument. Immediately, the company attorney finally spoke. Until that moment, he'd remained completely silent. Then he stood and adjusted his glasses. "The succession clause is valid." Mason's face went white. The attorney continued. "Effective immediately, succession rights transfer according to the trust structure." Every eye in the room turned toward me, because for the first time all night, everyone understood what that meant. A few minutes later, the photographer quietly approached me. He looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. Then he asked, "Would you like to retake the family photo?" The room waited, including Mason, including Victoria. I looked toward the backdrop, then at the half-finished photograph sitting on the camera screen, and smiled. "No." The photographer blinked. "No?" I shook my head. "Keep the original." The room was silent. Then I looked directly at Mason, the same man who told me I didn't belong less than an hour earlier, and I said, "I want to remember this version." Nobody spoke, because everybody understood. The picture already showed the truth. Not who belonged, but who thought they could decide. Dad's digital legacy file didn't give me a place in the family. It proved I'd never lost it. And as guests slowly left the ballroom, I realized something. They pushed me out of the family photo. Then Dad's digital will showed everyone whose name had been in the frame all along.